Hey dudes, I've been asked about the new TRP series ever since we found out they were going to be a thing. So my buddy Aaron Verzerak, can't pronounce his last name, loaned me one of these new TRP pistols, and he gave it to me when I was training my Guardian programs in June, which tends to be one of my busiest months out of the year. And so I fired about 2,000 rounds through it over the month of June, and here are my thoughts on it. So, a little show and tell. Everybody's probably seen my old school TRP operator I want to say I got this back in 2012. I've got in the neighborhood about 85 to 90,000 rounds through this thing. Obviously, I've had it milled for a dot. I've broken a couple of things on it over the years, but really happy with this gun. What originally happened is I messaged my buddy Eric Dornbush, who's a former Delta operator, and when he was in the unit, they ran 1911s for a long time. He's had a lot of experience with a lot of them, and so I immediately asked him, like, hey, I'm going to get a good high-end 1911, so should I get fill in the blank here or fill in the blank here? And his response was, go find you a Springfield TRP operator. You will not be disappointed with that gun. And if you ever met Eric Dornbush, him vouching for something like that is not a thing. So I was actually like, all right, he's very serious about that. There's also a pretty funny story behind how he ended up with a TRP operator during OTC. So go to one of his classes and ask him about it. So that's my little plug for him there. I do a lot of training with that dude. Anyway, so I've had this one for a long time, spent a lot of time with it, got a lot of experience with this pistol, and it has done incredibly well. So I did buy myself a backup years ago because I was sending it off and I was going and driving a long way to take courses. You tend to want to take another gun just in case. That one never left me high and dry where I needed one of these, but I did send it off to get a couple things done to it and refinish it. Those usually take weeks and weeks and weeks, and so I didn't want to go shoot a different 1911, so I bought another one of the OGs. I got this one for a song. I got actually less than I got that one for, but these were still somewhat plentiful at the time. I want to say this one was built in 2016 or something like that, but everything's original except that I have swapped these grips out from the original gray ones. I just wanted a little bit more aggressive and I wanted it to be black. So now let's compare the old school, newish school to the new school, old school. Anyway, old TRP versus new TRP. I did have the original full length rail one, had some holster compatibility issues with it. I don't really care about it holding value and looking cool. This is not for me to impress anybody. I actually shoot these guns. So when I couldn't get it in all my holsters, I got rid of it. So I sold it to a buddy. So he gets to make the extra money for it. So enter the new TRP. One of the things you will notice immediately is old school TRP is the TRP Operator. The new TRP doesn't say operator on it anywhere. And it doesn't say it on the website. Maybe it says it on the owner's manual or something, but I didn't get the owner's manual from Aaron, so don't know. Don't care. It used to be that operator meant that it had the rail on it, so yay. The old school TRPs had it written on the back of the slide. As you got into the 2019, I want to say 2018 timeframe, they would write it over here and kind of the same font as they got on the new ones. But the new ones, it just says TRP. Who cares, right? So let's talk good or some of the differences in the guns. Differences in the gun. Cone bull barrel versus a standard bull barrel with a bushing, or a standard barrel with a bushing. Cool. Talk about that in a second. Serrated top slide, different sights, different grips, different trigger, right? So let's talk this cone barrel. I definitely like the cone barrel more. Now, it is a different weight. This new pistol weighs in at 2.35 pounds. This one weighs in at 2.6 pounds. They're both chunky boys, but this one is slightly lighter. I believe, I could be wrong, that it has to do with the barrel weight. And this is a solid guide rod versus a two-piece screw-in guide rod. This has the slide serrations on the top. Those are what I'm attributing to the weight. Maybe I'm wrong on that. So I like the weight on the end of the gun that comes from having this cone bull barrel. So that weight tends to be on there, which means for me that I can get follow-up shots better sighted sooner by having that weight on the end. So as the gun recoils, it tends to want to stay down a lot closer to where it originated when I pressed the trigger. So I like that more. Some people absolutely did not like these complete one-piece guide rods. I've stripped them down in the field, made a tool out of stuff multiple times. Never did I think it was enough that I needed to swap it. Tons of other people don't like it and swap it out. That's great. Again, what I'm thinking is wait towards the end of the gun. Helps keep the muzzle down a little bit more. If you shoot an old school GI versus one of these, or even a normal, you can tell the difference between these two pistols if you hold them next to each other and shoot them. So that's why I like this one more. And maybe I'm just nostalgic and I like the original way that it's done. So now let's talk about the serrations in the top. Serrations in the top, I always thought that I was going to love this. I've never had a pistol with it. I've shot several pistols with it, but I've never run 2,000 rounds through one. But yeah, I've found that I don't like it. It tends to collect oil and dirt, and these sights, not a fan. It seems like they're zeroed at about 7 yards, and I have put them on a bag and shoot like I know what I'm doing. I'm not like, oh, it just zeroes off. Like if I can stack rounds on top of each other and they're all high and each group goes into the same one, I'm like, okay, this thing's zeroed a little bit close. So it seems to be like a 7-yard zero. Not a fan. When I zero my guns, it tends to be 15, 20, or 25, depending on the use of the gun. When I'm shooting a red dot, 20, right? But I never zero a gun closer than that. Not always or never guy, but I have yet to do that. So I don't have a good reasoning why I would ever zero a pistol that close. So anyway, moving on from that. The sights, not a fan. This seems to be cut flush instead of forward. Like, yeah, so anytime that I was presenting this gun in the bright Texas sun, the top of the rear sight would shine, which made it much more difficult to find the hard mechanical edges of the front sight and be super accurate. Now, I'm a stickler for accuracy. Sue me on that, but I've shot many single hole groups with this guy. Some of them almost exactly 45 shaped with this gun in front of clients. I could not even come close to it with this one, right? It doesn't mean the gun's inaccurate. I believe these sights are fighting. And the serrations on top, as the gun recoiled, because it had oil and dirt in it, it tended to make that front sight disappear, and it made it a lot more difficult to get that front sight into position for a sooner follow-up shot whenever it was required for what we were doing. So didn't turn out to be a fan of that. So I'm not going to have that done to any of my guns ever. It's not going to keep me from getting this gun. I'm probably going to end up getting one in peanut butter, and it may be less because the black sight, it may be less of an issue because of the black sight on a tan slide. Hey, maybe that's me. The two-piece guide rod, I always thought I wasn't going to like it. The thing did not come loose, and I fired it. I attempted to, I was like, let me put the thing on it and put a little tight on it. It did not come loose one bit in 1,700 rounds. And so I tried to tighten it up, didn't move. I'm like, man, it's as tight as it needs. And I finished the other day, and then I took out part and detail stripped it, and it was great. So it did not bother me like I thought it was going to. The way I did this is my buddy Aaron handed it to me and was like, yeah, do this, just don't yeet it across the range. I'm like, fantastic. I don't throw my guns or ones that don't belong to me, right? So I took it apart, filled it, not completely full, but I did a pretty good clean lubrication with Extreme Weapons grease and Extreme Weapons lube from Slip 2000. Those are my go-tos. And I was like, I'm going to attempt to not clean this gun at all, and fired 2,000 rounds through it down to that. I wasn't rubbing dirt into it and that sort of thing, but it did get plenty of dirt because those 9-hole drill, we end up down close to the ground and it's gravel on my range. So it's blowing dust and dirt everywhere. Yeah, so it was a bit, it definitely had some dirt in it and tons and tons of carbon by the time I got to 2,000 rounds. Gun did not slow down. I did have like 3 malfunctions. They were all magazine related. I had the slide go all the way home on empty magazines twice. It turns out it's the same magazine. That's telling me it's that magazine issue. And then I'll have a video of also me swapping from magazine to magazine. It does it one time there. And then I had a Wilson Combat 10-rounder in which the slide didn't go all the way into battery, so I popped the back of the slide and it went all the way in. That was actually pretty early on in the shooting, so definitely tells me the magazine's dirty because there wasn't like carbon in the gun that kept it from going. I shot it at least another 1,000 rounds after that occurred. So magazine-related issues as far as the gun goes went great. I only use Wilson Combat for 10-rounders and Trip Research magazines for my 8-rounders. I have a few Nighthawk 45 mags in there. I do not care for those in 9mm at all, but in 45 they tend to be working. I only think I got about 6 of them, but they were in there, but those are just because I had them. But I didn't have any issues with them either. Yeah. So one of the first things I would do if I ended up getting with this gun would be mill it and put a dot on it, or if they had some other form of adjustable sight that would go in there and actually hold zero, then I would throw it on there. The originals, never had a problem with them losing zero. I've heard people say that over and over. Oh, they worked their way out of position, and I'm like, yep, okay. I've got, you know, tons and tons of rounds on these. I've adjusted them the first time, and that's always been it. And I shoot them, and I train with them. They don't sit in a safe. So, just saying. The trigger. This is like a triangle-y weird trigger. It is polymer, I want to say. I did notice as I begin to get higher in the round count that it seemed like it put a lot of weight more on the trigger press. Definitely between the two, I like the aluminum trigger versus this polymer one, but it wasn't a deal breaker. Trigger still worked really well, and really not much creep. It tends to break it like what people refer to as more of a combat trigger, close to 4.5, 5 pounds. It's not like a 3 pound, like super light trigger or anything like that, but there's like no creep and very, very little reset. Pull straight to the rear, of course, because it's a 1911 trigger and it's perfect. So, still got the old school 20 lines per inch checkering on the front. Big fan of that. Magwell that comes with all the TRP series. This one's obviously blended into the frame and everything like that. Makes it, well, a little bit, makes it work quite well. Really did not have reliability issues out of it. So between the two, I will tell you, I'm going to grab my old school versus this newer one myself, just because some of the new features, not really a huge fan of. One of the last things I'll talk about is these grips. So the original came with the gray grips. I just wanted something a little bit more aggressive, so I'll put those on there. Now these are plenty aggressive, but what you see is they're very large countersink holes versus something that's smaller countersink holes like this. What happens when they're very large like this is you can almost see they make lines this way. The only issue that I run into is you're shooting high round count and you're sweating, all that sort of thing. You'll start to notice these kind of make a little bit of a serrated knife edge, and they start really cutting into your hand if you're shooting higher round counts over the couple of days of training. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. If you're shooting 200 rounds in, you know, a week or a month, you'll never notice. Don't worry about it. But if you're shooting a lot, it's going to be something that bothers you. If you shoot with gloves on, obviously it's not going to mesh up as much, but I'd probably end up swapping the grips off of it at some point myself, maybe just to be different. So this one's all murdered out, or whatever they like. Probably a terrible thing to call a pistol, but everything on it's black all the way down to the screws, whereas this one has some silver accents. In my OG, the slide stop was also silver colored or stainless color, whatever it is they wanted to call it. Bad parts about the pistol, something that did not work out, is when I was detail stripping it the other day after the 2,000 rounds, as I began to pull the grips off, the head of one of the grip screws popped off, and I ended up having to pull that bushing and put a new one in it. So it's they always come with Torx head screws. Not a fan of those, so I ended up swapping these back all to slotted head screws. There's just not enough material to be putting those on there, and you do want a little bit of torque on them, maybe slight amount of Loctite or nail polish to keep those things in there, because they do tend to come out or start working their way out over recoil of a long time. I did tighten them back up, snug them back up at about 1,500 rounds when I came in. I had a day and a half between classes, so I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna clean, I'm going to not clean, I'm gonna tighten anything up on this gun. And that's when I had the chance to check this guy, and it was exactly where it needed to be, but I did tighten these guys up. So any of my guns that are going to be high use, I swap these out to slotted grip screws. There's just no reason for the Torx head other than maybe looks. I don't think they look any better myself personally. So that's my 2 cents on these particular pistols. Again, between the two, I'm going to grab the old school, but nothing wrong with this gun. And there's nothing that if it does begin to bother you, for you to fix. Now, if you don't like anything that I've said, sorry. Oh, he's nitpicking. Of course. Because they're freaking two 1911s, you jackwagon. There's slight differences. It's not like, oh, he's got a hammer and then he's got a shovel. That's not the comparison, right? So calm down with that. So other than that, out.